"Mom says wishes don't work. Can you help mine?" said the girl to the single dad CEO at the toy aisle. The toy aisle smelled like fresh plastic and quiet desperation, the kind that clung to fluorescent lights and echoed off polished floors. Shelves rose on both sides like bright, merciless towers, boxes shouting promises they could not keep. Daniel Cross stood frozen in the middle of it, one hand on the handle of a shopping cart he didn't really need, the other holding a small blue dinosaur with chipped paint. He didn't know why he'd picked it up, maybe because it was cheap, maybe because it looked lonely, or maybe because the silence of this aisle felt louder than the boardrooms he ruled every day. Daniel was a man the world called powerful, CEO visionary, single father. Headlines loved him for what he built after his wife died and what he never let himself become afterward. But none of that mattered here, not in this aisle. Here, he was just a tired man who hadn't slept properly in years, staring at toys he didn't understand, trying to decide which one would make his six-year old son smile without reminding him too much of the mother he barely remembered. That was when the girl spoke. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice was small but steady, the kind that carried a lifetime of practice, asking without expecting answers. Daniel turned. She couldn't have been more than 8. Thin jacket, sneakers worn down at the toes, dark hair pulled back with a rubber band that had lost its stretch. She stood beside a shelf of dolls, clutching a pink box to her chest like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. "Yes," Daniel said, his voice instinctively softening. The girl looked up at him with eyes far older than her face. "Mom says wishes don't work," she said carefully, as if quoting a rule. "But can you help mine?" The words hit him harder than any boardroom ambush ever had. He didn't answer right away. People asked him for help all the time. Investors, charities, reporters, but no one ever asked like this. No angle, no urgency, just hope standing barefoot on a cold floor. "What's your wish?" he asked. She hugged the box tighter. "This doll," she said. "It talks, my little sister. She cries a lot at night. Mom works late, and I try to help, but sometimes she just wants someone to talk to her. The doll talks." Daniel glanced at the price tag. It was nothing to him, less than a coffee meeting, less than the silence in his penthouse. He reached for his wallet. Before he could speak, a sharp voice cut through the aisle. "Lily." A woman marched toward them, eyes tired, jaw set in a way that suggested she had learned not to break in public. "What are you doing?" she snapped, pulling the doll from the girl's arms. "I told you not to bother people." The girl's shoulders folded inward. "I wasn't bothering," she whispered. I'm sorry," the woman said to Daniel without really looking at him. "She doesn't understand. We're just looking." Daniel held up his hand. "It's okay. We don't need charity." The woman interrupted, her cheeks flushing with something that wasn't anger but pride, held together by exhaustion. She pushed the doll back onto the shelf. "Come on." The girl glanced back once, her eyes meeting Daniel's. There was no anger there, just disappointment, quiet and practiced. Then she was gone, swallowed by the brightness of the store. Daniel stood there longer than he meant to. The dinosaur slipped from his hand into the cart. Around him, shoppers passed, carts rattled, children laughed. Life continued at full volume, but something had shifted. A crack had formed where certainty used to be. He told himself it was nothing, just a moment, just a child. Still, as he wheeled his cart away, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been asked something far bigger than money, and that he had already answered it wrong. At the end of the aisle, Daniel stopped. He turned back, scanning the crowd, suddenly afraid that if he didn't find that girl again, something important would be lost forever. And that was when he saw the doll, lying on the floor, its voice softly repeating, "Hello, is anyone there?" The doll's voice echoed faintly in Daniel's head long after he had left the store, long after the automatic doors slid shut behind him like a final judgment. "Hello, is anyone there?" It followed him into the parking lot, into the driver's seat of his black SUV, into the quiet drive home where the city lights blurred like tired stars, He told himself he was being ridiculous. He had meetings in the morning, a son waiting at home, a life built on efficiency and control. And yet, his hands stayed frozen on the steering wheel long after the engine started, as if moving forward without looking back would cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. Daniel had learned how to survive by not looking back. After his wife, Emma, died 3 years earlier, the world had split cleanly in two. Before, there was laughter, messes, bedtime stories, her voice calling his name from another room. After, there was silence sharpened into discipline. He poured himself into work because work did not ask him why he still set 2 cups out some mornings. Work did not cry at night. Work did not ask questions his heart couldn't answer. Raising Noah alone had been both his anchor and his quiet terror. Every decision felt heavier when there was no one to share it with. Every mistake echoed louder. He hired the best nannies, read the parenting books, showed up to school events with a smile that convinced everyone he was doing just fine. But late at night, when Noah slept curled around an old sweater that still smelled faintly like his mother, Daniel wondered if love could really be enough when it came wrapped in grief. That was why the toy aisle had felt so dangerous. It wasn't about the money, it was about the reminder. Toys were promises. I see you, I know what you love, I want you to be happy. Promises he was terrified of breaking. At home, Noah ran to him the moment he walked in. "Dad, did you get it?" he asked, eyes bright. Daniel forced a smile and lifted the blue dinosaur from the bag. "I did." Noah hugged it like treasure. "He's perfect," he said, already assigning it a name Daniel couldn't quite catch. For a moment, the weight on Daniel's chest eased. But as he watched his son disappear down the hallway, making roaring sounds, the girl's face returned to him. The way she'd held that doll. The way her mother's voice had cracked just slightly beneath the sharpness. Later that night, Daniel stood by Noah's door, listening to his son breathe. He remembered another night, years ago, when Emma had stood beside him, whispering about dreams and fears, about the kind of parents they wanted to be. "If we can help someone," she'd said then, "we should, even if it's small, especially if it's small." The memory hurt more than he expected. Across the city, in a small apartment above a closed laundromat, Lily sat on the edge of a mattress she shared with her little sister, Mia. The room was dim, lit only by a streetlight flickering through a cracked window. Mia whimpered in her sleep, tiny fists curling and uncurling, as if searching for something to hold. Lily reached out, smoothing her hair, whispering stories she made up on the spots. Stories about brave dolls and quiet heroes and wishes that worked when no one was looking. Their mother, Rosa, leaned against the kitchen counter, counting bills she already knew wouldn't add up. She hated herself for snapping in the store, hated the look on Lily's face when she'd pulled the doll away. But pride was cheaper than hope, and hope had a way of hurting when it failed. She had learned that lesson too many times. "I'm sorry," Rosa whispered toward the bedroom, though she knew Lily was pretending to sleep. Lily didn't answer. She just stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment in the toy aisle, the man's eyes. Not pity, not impatience, something else, something warm. She wondered what it would be like to believe again. That same night, Daniel sat alone in his study, staring at a security photo pulled up on his tablet. An image he'd requested on impulse from the store's system. It showed the toy aisle, frozen in time, a little girl, a tired mother, a doll on the shelf. Daniel exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure whether walking away had been the stronger choice, or the weaker one. And as he closed the screen, he realized this wasn't over, not even close. The next afternoon, the toy store felt different, louder somehow, sharper. Daniel noticed everything this time, the way the air hummed with overstimulation, the way parents argued quietly over budgets, the way children learned early to read disappointment in adult faces. He hadn't planned on coming back. In fact, he'd told himself repeatedly that he wouldn't. But intention had dissolved the moment he saw the doll's empty space on the shelf in his memory, the moment Lily's voice had replayed in his mind with unsettling clarity. He wore a baseball cap pulled low not to hide his wealth. Money had a way of revealing itself no matter what, but to hide his face. He didn't want recognition, he didn't want thanks, he wanted something far more dangerous, closure. He found them near the clearance bins. Lily was kneeling on the floor, carefully sorting through a pile of mismatched toys like they were fragile artifacts. Her mother stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes darting around with the nervous awareness of someone who had learned that being poor made you visible in all the wrong ways. Daniel slowed his steps. His heart thudded harder than it ever had before a merger or hostile takeover. "Hi," he said, stopping a careful distance away. "We met yesterday." Rosa stiffened instantly, her chin lifted, defenses snapping into place. "I said we're fine." "I know," Daniel replied gently. "I'm not here to." Lily looked up. Recognition flared, followed quickly by embarrassment. She scrambled to her feet. "I'm sorry," she blurted out. "I shouldn't have asked you. I didn't mean to." "Hey," Daniel said quickly, lowering himself slightly so he wasn't towering over her. "You didn't do anything wrong." A store associate appeared as if summoned by tension. Her smile was tight, professional. "Is everything okay here?" "Yes," Rosa said too fast. "We're just looking." The associate's gaze flicked from Rosa's worn jacket to Lily's scuffed shoes, then to Daniel. Expensive watch, clean shoes, quiet confidence. Something shifted in her expression. "Sir," she said, turning to Daniel, "if you're being bothered, we can." "I'm not," Daniel interrupted. "I started the conversation." Rosa's face burned. "We don't need help," she said, louder now. "We're not stealing, we're not begging, we're just—" The associate raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, no one said." But the damage was done. Nearby shoppers slowed, eyes lingered, whispers bloomed in the artificial air. Lily shrank beside her mother, cheeks flushing, hands twisting together like she wanted to disappear into her sleeves. Daniel felt something ugly twist in his chest, anger, sharp and unfamiliar. Not at Rosa, not at the associate, at himself, for bringing them back into a space that had already taught them how quickly dignity could be questioned. "This is my fault," he said clearly. "I asked to speak with them." The associate hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Of course, let me know if you need anything." She walked away, though not without one last suspicious glance over her shoulder. Silence settled heavy and suffocating. Rosa exhaled slowly. "You should go," she said, her voice lower now, frayed at the edges. "You don't understand how this looks." "I think I do," Daniel said, "more than you think." Lily looked up at him, eyes glossy. "It's okay," she whispered, trying to be brave. "Wishes don't work anyway." The words cut deeper than humiliation ever could. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, then stopped himself. Money would only make this worse. He remembered Emma's voice again, especially if it's small. He crouched down and met Lily's eyes. "What if," he said carefully, "wishes don't work on their own? But people do." Rosa's laugh was bitter. "People say that right before they disappear." Daniel swallowed. "Maybe, or maybe sometimes they come back." Before Rosa could respond, the associate returned, this time with a manager. A man with practiced concern and tired authority. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked. Rosa shook her head quickly. "No, we were leaving." The manager's eyes lingered on the clearance bin, on Lily's hands still clutching a broken toy with no batteries. "Please don't sit on the floor," he said flatly. "It's a safety issue." Daniel stood slowly, every muscle tight. He wanted to say his name, to end this with one sentence, but power used this way felt wrong. It felt like cheating, and worse, it felt like it would teach Lily the wrong lesson. Rosa took Lily's hand. "Come on," she murmured. As they turned to leave, Lily looked back one last time. Her lips trembled, but she forced a smile. "Thank you for trying," she said softly. Daniel watched them walk away, shame burning hot behind his eyes. He had wanted to help. Instead, he had made everything worse. And as the automatic doors closed behind them again, Daniel realized something devastating. This wasn't just about a doll anymore. It was about whether he had the courage to step in when kindness cost him something real. The days that followed were heavier than Daniel expected, as if the encounter had lodged itself beneath his skin and refused to leave. He moved through meetings on autopilot, nodded at projections he usually dissected with precision, signed documents without feeling the familiar rush of control. At night, when the city fell quiet and the glass walls of his penthouse reflected a man he barely recognized, Lily's voice returned to him. "Wishes don't work anyway." It echoed not as a child's disappointment, but as a verdict the world had delivered far too early. Noah noticed first. Children always did. "You're not listening," he said one evening, sitting cross-legged on the rug with his dynasty or army. "You're here, but you're not here." Daniel knelt beside him, guilt tightening his chest. "I'm sorry, buddy, just thinking about Mom," Noah asked too casually. Daniel froze. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes." Noah pushed a dinosaur toward him. "She says we should help people when we can, even if it's scary." Daniel's breath caught. "She said that?" Noah smiled. "All the time." That night, Daniel did something he hadn't done since Emma's funeral. He cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let the pressure leak out. He cried for the life he'd lost, for the father he was still learning to be, and for a little girl who had asked for help and walked away believing she didn't deserve it. Across town, Rosa's days blurred into exhaustion. Double shifts, bus rides with aching feet, constant calculations, what could wait, what couldn't. Lily never complained, which somehow made it worse. She helped with Mia, folded laundry, told stories that grew quieter each night. Rosa saw how quickly hope drained from children who learned not to ask. She recognized it because it had happened to her too. One evening, Lily came home holding a flyer. "They're doing a wish tree," she said carefully, like she was testing the words. At school, Rosa barely looked up from the sink. "Those are for kids whose parents don't." She stopped herself, closed her eyes. "What kind of wishes?" Lily shrugged. "Small ones." Rosa swallowed. "We'll see." But when Lily went to bed, Rosa unfolded the flyer and stared at it for a long time. Community Holiday Wish Drive. It felt like an invitation to disappointment, but also like a door she'd slammed too many times before. Meanwhile, Daniel began asking questions he'd never needed to ask before. Quiet ones, off the record. He learned about the neighborhoods his company's stores served, about the families who came during sales and left empty-handed, about how pride and survival often collided in places like toy aisles. Each answer chipped away at the wall he'd built between success and responsibility. One afternoon, he returned to the store, not as a customer, but as an observer. He watched interactions he'd once ignored, the associate who hovered too close to certain shoppers, the manager who enforced rules unevenly, the subtle humiliations that piled up unnoticed. He didn't announce himself. He didn't correct anyone. He just watched, and the watching changed him. That evening, Daniel found the doll again, the same one. It sat on a shelf near the back, its box slightly dented, discounted now. He picked it up and pressed the button. "Hello, is anyone there?" "Yes," he whispered. "I am." He bought it without ceremony and placed it carefully on the passenger seat of his car like something fragile and sacred. But instead of driving home, he drove across town, past the places he usually avoided, until the buildings grew smaller and the streetlights flickered. He didn't know exactly where Lily lived, only the school district, only the edges of her world. He parked and sat there, heart racing, doubts flooding in. Was this intrusive? Too late? Another way to fail, he thought of Rosa's words. People say that right before they disappear. Daniel gripped the steering wheel. "Not this time," he said aloud. At the same moment, Lily lay awake beside Mia, listening to her sister's uneven breathing, tracing imaginary shapes on the ceiling. She closed her eyes and made a wish she didn't fully believe in anymore. Not for toys, not for miracles, but for someone to prove her wrong. Outside, a car engine idled softly on the street below. And neither of them knew that the next choice Daniel made would change all of their lives, or break something that could never be fixed again. Daniel didn't knock, not at first. He sat in the dark car, engine off now, watching the apartment building across the street like it might speak to him. The windows were unevenly lit, some glowing warm, others dark and hollow. Somewhere behind one of those thin walls, a mother was trying to be strong, and a little girl was learning how to stop asking. The doll rested on the seat beside him, its box catching the streetlight. He realized with a strange clarity that this wasn't about delivering a toy anymore. It was about crossing a line he had avoided his entire adult life, the line between observing pain and stepping directly into it. He finally got out of the car. The stairwell smelled like old detergent and damp concrete. Daniel climbed slowly, each step echoing louder than it should have. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. He raised his hand to knock, then froze. What if he was wrong? What if he made things worse again? Before he could retreat, the door opened. Rosa stood there, eyes wide, fear flashing before recognition settled in. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I'm sorry," Daniel said immediately. "I shouldn't have come like this. I needed to return something." Lily appeared behind her mother, clutching the doorframe. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Not excitement, shock. "You followed us." Rosa's voice sharpened, fear turning into anger. "That's not okay." "You're right," Daniel said. "It's not, and if you want me to leave, I will. Please, 1 minute." Rosa hesitated. Lily's fingers tightened around the frame. Daniel held out the box. This was left behind. Lily gasped softly. The doll. Rosa stared at it like it might explode. "We didn't drop it," she said. "We never bought it." "I know," Daniel replied. "I did." Silence stretched thin. "We don't accept gifts from strangers," Rosa said, though her voice wavered. "Then don't accept it as a gift," Daniel said. "Accept it as an apology for not doing better when it mattered." Lily looked up at her mother, eyes shining. "Mom," Rosa closed her eyes. She was tired. Tired of fighting every kindness like it was a threat. Tired of being strong when no one was watching. She stepped aside. 1 minute, she said. Inside, the apartment was smaller than Daniel had imagined. Clean, but worn thin by effort. Mia stirred on the mattress, letting out a small cry. Lily rushed to her, instinctive and practiced. "She wakes up scared," Lily said softly, almost apologetically. Daniel knelt and placed the doll gently near Mia. He pressed the button. "Hello, is anyone there?" Mia stilled. Her eyes fluttered open. Then the doll spoke again, softer this time, a programmed lullaby tone. Mia's fingers wrapped around it. Her breathing slowed. Lily covered her mouth to stop herself from crying. Rosa turned away, wiping her eyes. "You shouldn't do this," she said hoarsely. "People help once, then disappear. It hurts more." Daniel stood slowly. "I know. That's why I didn't want to promise anything." Rosa faced him. "Then why are you here?" Daniel hesitated. The truth rose up, raw and terrifying. "Because my wife died," he said. "And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be brave about caring. Your daughter reminded me." Rosa stared at him, stunned. "I don't want to be someone who walks away anymore." Daniel continued, "Not from my son, not from this." Lily stepped forward. "So, wishes do work?" she asked quietly. Daniel met her eyes. "I think they start working when people decide to." A knock interrupted them. Hard, official. Rosa's face drained of color. "It's him," she whispered. "Who?" Daniel asked. "The landlord," Rosa said. "I'm late again." The knock came louder. "Rosa, open up." Rosa's shoulders slumped. "I'll handle it." "No," Daniel said gently. "Let me." She shook her head. "You don't understand." But Daniel was already moving. He opened the door to a man with a clipboard and impatience carved into his face. "You're late," the man snapped. "If rent isn't paid by tomorrow, I start the eviction process." Daniel stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. "I'll cover it," Daniel said calmly. The landlord laughed. "Yeah, and who are you?" Daniel straightened. "Someone who doesn't like watching children lose their homes." The landlord scoffed. "You can't just—" "I can," Daniel said, pulling out his phone, "and I will." Behind the door, Rosa pressed her ear to the wood, heart racing. Because in that moment, she realized this man wasn't just offering help. He was about to change everything, and not all change comes without consequences. The landlord's laughter faded the moment Daniel finished the call. Not because of money. Money was common in threats and bribes. But because of certainty. Daniel didn't argue, didn't posture. He spoke like someone used to decisions becoming reality the moment they left his mouth. The landlord's eyes flicked to the phone screen, then back to Daniel's face, recalculating. "I'll expect confirmation," the landlord muttered, already retreating down the stairs. Power, Daniel realized, often worked best when it didn't raise its voice. He stood there a moment longer, breathing in the stale hallway air, aware of how strange this felt. He had closed billion-dollar deals with less weight than this small, human exchange. When he turned back and opened the door, Rosa was standing just inside, arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was holding her world together by force. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's why I did." Rosa shook her head slowly. "This doesn't mean we owe you anything. I wouldn't want you to," he said. "Debt should never come attached to kindness." She studied him then, not as a threat, not as a savior, but as a man standing in her living room with honest exhaustion in his eyes. "You can't fix everything," she said quietly. "I'm not trying to," Daniel answered. Just this moment, for a while, no one spoke. Mia slept with the doll tucked under her chin, its plastic chest rising and falling with her tiny breaths. Lily sat beside her, one hand resting protectively on her sister's arm, as if afraid the calm might vanish if she moved. "Why us?" Lily finally asked. Daniel crouched again, lowering himself to her level. "Because you asked," he said simply, "and because I didn't want you growing up thinking asking was wrong." Rosa's eyes burned. She turned away so the children wouldn't see. Daniel left soon after, no speeches, no promises, just a quiet goodbye and a promise to check in not with solutions, but with presence. As he stepped back into the night, something inside him felt different. Lighter and more frightening. Caring had reopened a door he'd sealed with grief, and now the cold air was rushing in. The next morning, his name was everywhere. A photo had surfaced, grainy, poorly framed, of Daniel Cross standing in a low-income apartment hallway, phone in hand. The caption speculated wildly. CEO stages publicity stunt. Single dad billionaire plays hero. What's he really buying? By noon, his board wanted answers. This could undermine investor confidence. One director warned. "You've cultivated an image of discipline." Another added, "Getting personally involved like this is risky." Daniel listened, hands folded, expression unreadable. When they finished, he spoke quietly. "I didn't ask for permission to be human." Silence followed, not agreement, not approval, just the uncomfortable recognition that he meant it. That afternoon, Rosa received a call from the landlord, apologetic, formal, confirming that her rent issue was resolved and that future payments could be adjusted. She sat on the edge of the bed after hanging up, stunned. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by fear. Help always came with strings, even when it said it didn't. At school, Lily noticed the whispers, parents murmuring, a teacher pulling her aside gently, asking questions that felt too careful. Lily hugged her backpack tighter, wishing suddenly that she'd never asked in that toy aisle. Wishing she could protect her mother from the attention, from the rumors, from the idea that they had been saved. That evening, Daniel picked up Noah from school earlier than usual. They walked home hand in hand. "Why are people mad at you?" Noah asked. Daniel considered the question. "Because sometimes doing the right thing makes people uncomfortable." Noah nodded like that made sense. Mom would say that. Daniel smiled faintly. She would. Across town, Rosa watched the news on mute. Daniel's face filled the screen, words scrolled beneath it. Controversy, motive, scrutiny. She turned it off, heart pounding. This was the part she feared, the part where kindness became a spectacle, where they became a story instead of people. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry if this made things harder." "That wasn't my intention." She stared at the screen, then typed back slowly. "Good intentions don't stop consequences." A moment passed. "I know," came the reply, "but I'm still here." Rosa closed her eyes. That was the most dangerous promise of all. Because now, with the world watching and pressure closing in from every side, Daniel would have to decide whether still here meant convenience or commitment. And Lily, lying awake beside her sister, wondered if believing again was about to cost them more than she could bear. The storm broke quietly, not with shouting or headlines, but with a knock on Rosa's door one early morning just after sunrise. The world outside was pale and uncertain, the kind of hour where anything could still turn out differently. Rosa froze when she heard it, fear returning on instinct. Lily sat up in bed, heart racing, the doll tucked under Mia's arm, murmuring softly to itself. Rosa opened the door slowly. Daniel stood there alone, no camera crews, no assistants, no carefully managed distance, just a man in a simple jacket, eyes tired but steady. "I won't come in unless you ask," he said. "I just needed to say something face to face." Rosa studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than ever, as if the weight of the past weeks had pressed the walls inward. Daniel didn't sit. He didn't touch anything. He stood like someone who knew he had crossed a line and was ready to answer for it. "I'm stepping down as CEO," he said. Rosa's breath caught. "What? Not permanently," Daniel added gently. "But long enough. The board wants distance. They want control, and I realized something. I've been hiding behind titles because they felt safer than people. That stops now." Lily appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "Is it because of us?" Daniel turned to her immediately. "No," he said firmly, "it's because of me. You didn't cause this. You showed me what I was avoiding." Rosa's voice shook. "You're giving up everything." Daniel shook his head. "I'm choosing something. There's a difference." He knelt in front of Lily, not as a savior, not as a hero, but as a man asking to be understood. "Wishes don't work like magic," he said softly. "They work like doors. Someone has to open them, and sometimes opening one means closing another." Lily looked down at the doll, then back at him. "So, this wasn't pretend." "No," Daniel said, "none of it." Rosa exhaled slowly, years of suspicion loosening just enough to let truth in. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel stood. "Now, I help without owning your story, quietly, on your terms, and if you ever want me to stop, I will." Silence settled, not heavy this time, but thoughtful. Outside, the city continued as it always had. But inside that small apartment, something shifted into place. Weeks passed. The headlines faded, replaced by the next scandal, the next outrage. Daniel kept his word. He showed up, not with checks or cameras, but with consistency. He helped Rosa find stable hours. He connected her with childcare support without announcing it. He sat with Lily during a school event where she'd once felt invisible, clapping louder than anyone when she stepped onto the stage. Noah met Lily one afternoon at the park. They traded dinosaurs and stories, grief and laughter finding a way to coexist. Rosa watched from a bench, heart aching in a way that felt almost hopeful. One evening, near the end of winter, the four of them stood in the toy aisle again. Not the same store, a smaller one, quieter. Lily reached for a shelf and paused. She looked at Daniel, then at her mother. "Can I?" she asked. Rosa nodded. "You don't have to ask like you're afraid anymore." Lily smiled and picked a simple doll. Nothing fancy, nothing loud. Just right. At the register, Lily turned to Daniel. "I know wishes don't always work," she said, "but I think Sometimes they change people. Daniel smiled, eyes shining. I think you're right. That night, after the children were asleep, Rosa stood by the window, watching snow fall softly onto the street. Daniel stood beside her, not too close, not too far. I was wrong, Rosa said quietly, not about being careful, but about believing kindness always disappears. Daniel nodded. I was wrong too. I thought protecting myself meant staying distant. Turns out it just made me lonely. They stood in silence, not fixing the world, not promising forever, just sharing the truth of the moment. In the bedroom, Lily lay awake, listening to Mia's steady breathing, the doll tucked between them. She thought about the toy aisle, about the wish she'd almost been afraid to make. She smiled, because the greatest wish hadn't been for a doll at all. It had been for someone to stop, to listen, and to stay. And this time it had worked.